Hey guys, welcome back to Eldest Born, a Three Brothers podcast. I want to wish everyone a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. In this episode, we will be reviewing the Doctor Who 2023 Christmas special. Now, it's a very awesome year for Doctor Who. We got 3 60th anniversary specials, and we just got the final special of the year, which is the 2023 Christmas special, starring the 15th Doctor, played by Ncuti Gatwa. Now, if I haven't mentioned it before, this episode is entitled The Church on Ruby Road. And I have to say, it was definitely a refreshing experience to get a Christmas special once again. The last one we got was in 2017, with Peter Capaldi in the role of the 12th Doctor. And then for the 3 years that Jodie Whittaker played the 13th Doctor, we only had festive specials, which were essentially nondescript holiday specials that aired during New Year's. But this year we are getting back to basics. We are finally getting another Christmas special. I'm super stoked, and I've even come prepared. I've got my TARDIS snow globe with me, and I'm super excited to get into the review of this episode. So let's jump right in. All right, guys, we're going to jump right into our summary. So here we go. So right off the bat, we see the Doctor appear in the TARDIS in front of a church in which a mysterious cloaked figure is dropping off a baby. Now, it's made apparent that this baby is being abandoned by its mother and is being left in front of this church. And the baby is introduced to us as Ruby, and she's named after Ruby Road, which is the street that the church is on. Now, she was born on Christmas Eve, and that's all the information we get for now. Now, after the intro sequence, we see Ruby Sunday being interviewed by Davina McCall. Apparently, she is a guest on a show in which Davina and her team seeks out the biological parents of orphans that were abandoned at birth. Now, obviously, there's no guarantee that this process will work, but Ruby Sunday is optimistic that she will be able to find her birth parents by being on this show. Now, during the interview, we see a bunch of very strange things going on. Apparently, there are these gray, mischievous hands popping up all over the place, moving things around, including one of the workers' coffee cup and a few plugs that are connected to the lights pointed at Ruby and Davina. Now, that being said, the interview is obviously being sabotaged by whoever these little gray hands belong to. And inevitably, it ends with the worker tripping on the overhead lighting's cord, knocking it over and almost hitting Ruby and Davina as they have to dodge both lights falling and one of the plugs flying out of the wall and hitting Davina in the back of the head. Now, I honestly like this scene because it kind of starts off the episode with a bit of a violent, threatening vibe. Even though we don't quite know what's going on, we get the sense that there is real danger that's lurking behind every corner. Now, fast forward, and we see Ruby Sunday playing the keyboard in some sort of makeshift band that she's in. And the lead singer happens to be a transgendered female. I think this is just one of many appearances of transgenderism in Doctor Who. The first being Rose Noble in the 60th anniversary special. And I have a feeling we're going to keep seeing this woke agenda pop up with the appearance of more and more transgendered and homosexual characters. But that's just my guess. So let's see what happens. So, by some stroke of bad luck, Ruby Sunday's keyboard malfunctions and the sound cuts out. So the band has to stop singing. Once again, we fast forward to what I inevitably predicted, which is the Doctor dancing flamboyantly on the dance floor in a kilt and undershirt. Now, this is very uncharacteristic of past Doctors that we've seen. But if this is what they're going for with Ncuti Gatwa's 15th Doctor, I guess this is going to be the new normal. He seems to be a very flamboyant, very emotionally in touch version of the Doctor. So we'll have to see as his character continues to develop over the season. Now, as Ruby Sunday almost spills her drink, the Doctor appears next to her at the table she's standing at and catches it. Now, this is the first interaction that the two characters have had together since this special started. The Doctor does a whole spiel with the psychic paper saying that he is Health and Safety Gin and Tonic Division, which is kind of a funny joke, not gonna lie. It just creates a little lighthearted moment between the two characters. Now, as Ruby and her bandmates leave the club that they were at and proceed to get into a taxi cab, the Doctor is close behind, watching her movements. Ruby goes on to tell her friends that she's been experiencing a slew of bad luck lately. And as the cab drives away, the doctor notices a blue creature on the building across the street, loosening the cables on this giant snowman decoration that is about to fall on Ruby's cab. Now the doctor uses his new sonic screwdriver to change the traffic light and allow Ruby's cab to go unharmed by the giant snowman. But as a woman with a stroller passes under the snowman, the doctor quickly runs to save her life, and the snowman proceeds to fall, crashing down on the doctor, who manages to come out of the snowman unharmed. Now this proceeds to initiate a scene where a bumbling idiot of a police officer comes over to take a report from the doctor on what had just happened. And they get into a whole conversation about who the doctor is, where he's from, what he's doing. And then the doctor, in what I actually considered to be somewhat of a heartwarming exchange, told the police officer that his girlfriend was going to say yes to his proposal on Christmas Day. He knew this because his sonic screwdriver made a noise indicating that the police officer had a diamond in his pocket. I thought the whole thing was kind of sweet, although it did draw a little too much attention to the fact that the cop was a heterosexual male, and the doctor was very specific to mention that during this exchange. So it kind of seems like there's a lot of identity politics going on throughout this episode so far. Now we fast forward to the next day, and apparently it is Christmas Eve. Ruby comes home from the store to her two neighbors arguing about who put the doctor's TARDIS in front of Mrs. Frost's house. Now the two neighbors, specifically Mrs. Frost, seem to be relatively unimportant side characters at this point. But we soon find out towards the end of the episode that that is not exactly the case. Now as Ruby arrives home, we're introduced to her adopted mother and her adopted grandmother. In a very sweet scene, we see Ruby get some news from her mother that they are about to foster a young baby. Now, apparently her mother is a longtime foster mother who has fostered 33 children in the past. And Ruby is one of those children. But in Ruby's case, she was the only one of the foster children who was adopted. Now, in this scene, a woman from the foster agency comes over and drops off the little infant baby named Lulubelle, which everyone seems to make fun of because of her name. Then Ruby proceeds to get a call from Davina saying that there was no trace of her biological parents that came up in the search, and that there's nothing more for them to do, and she's really sorry. So obviously disappointed, Ruby is about to hang up when Davina asks her if she's been experiencing any bad luck lately. And Ruby admits that yes, she's been experiencing a ton of bad luck. And Davina said that in a similar sense, a number of unfortunate accidents have been befalling Davina, and she is currently in the hospital, sitting in a wheelchair with her leg up and her arm in a sling. And just as the call is wrapping up, another one of those blue creatures sabotages the tree that Davina is sitting next to, and it begins to fall on her. And as she screams in terror, the call drops. Ruby's mom then proceeds to go out grocery shopping and tells Ruby that her only job is not to lose the baby, which is obvious foreshadowing for what's about to happen. Because right after the mom leaves, Ruby hears odd noises on the baby monitor, goes into the baby's room and finds the baby gone, with the skylight open. So she puts a ladder under the skylight, climbs onto the roof, and sees two little goblins hissing at her and carrying the baby up a ladder to an unknown destination above the clouds. Ruby proceeds to grab the ladder and hold on as it lifts her off the roof and flies away with her. And then we see the doctor running from rooftop to rooftop as he leaps off after Ruby and grabs onto the ladder himself. The doctor proceeds to introduce himself and they exchange a few words, and then he shows her a gadget he recently invented, which are essentially anti-gravity smart gloves. And by each one of them putting on a single glove, they are able to feel weightless as they hold on to the ladder, which is something new we haven't seen before in Doctor Who. So that's pretty cool. The duo eventually manage to climb up the ladder, and as they enter what seems to be a flying pirate ship made of wood and rope, they are immediately captured by these goblin creatures and tied up in the brig. Now, as Ruby Sunday is amazed by how fast the Doctor is able to undo his restraints, the Doctor mentions that he once spent a hot and steamy summer with Harry Houdini, and Ruby just looks at him perplexed, which obviously implies that the Doctor and Harry had some sort of homosexual relationship, and it's just par for the course with where we've been going with the themes and issues of these Doctor Who episodes so far. So obviously Russell T Davies is implying that Ncuti Gatwa's Doctor is probably gay, as I predicted. Now, as the Doctor proceeds to decipher the tangled mess of ropes that is holding the ship together, calling it a new language, so to speak, he's able to release them from the brig, and they proceed to crawl into ductwork of sorts that leads them to this big room where all the goblins are holding baby Lulubelle. Now, in a similar fashion to Neil Patrick Harris's musical number in the 60th anniversary special, The Giggle, we see the goblins proceed to break out into a very poorly lip-synced song about how they're about to gobble up and devour this young infant child. And then it's revealed to us that the leader of the goblins is this oversized, fat Goblin King who is so big that he can't even move inside of his own ship. And there's a conveyor belt that's slowly bringing baby Lulubelle into his mouth. When the Goblin song is finally over, the Doctor and Ruby fall from above, landing on the conveyor belt, and they are able to save Lulubelle. But in order to escape the Goblin ship, they break out into song to distract the goblins, and then, as the Doctor puts on the anti-gravity gloves, he reverses the polarity, making him and Ruby heavier than usual, and they jump out of the ship, descending at a very fast rate of speed, back onto the rooftop of Ruby's home. Now, this leads into a kind of boring 10 minutes of the episode where the Doctor is trying to decipher how the goblins operate and what they actually want. And he seems to come to the conclusion that apart from wanting to eat people, they are motivated by bad luck. Apparently, they follow people around who have bad luck or who are subject to some sort of weird coincidences happening in their lives, and they target them. And it is a weird coincidence that baby Lulubelle was born on the same day as Ruby Sunday, and they're both orphans who were abandoned. So that seems to be why the goblins are targeting Lulubelle. They've been following Ruby Sunday around because of all the bad luck she's been having lately, and they pick someone coincidentally close to her, which, if you ask me, this whole concept makes zero sense, but the Doctor seems to be very amused by the whole thing, saying that it's a new science that he's just discovered, the science of luck. That being said, Ruby's mother comes home. The Doctor is introduced to her and also happens to be flirting with the grandmother a little bit. And eventually we see the window break and the roof of the flat crack above everyone's heads. Now, it seems like the goblins landed their ship on the roof, but that actually isn't the case. As the Doctor walks through the house to investigate, we see that Ruby has disappeared and her mother has no memory of her existence. The Doctor immediately understands that the goblins time traveled back to the day that Ruby was born and abandoned in front of the church. Because if they can't have baby Lulubelle, they're going to take Ruby instead. So the Doctor hops in his TARDIS and time travels back to that day. And this brings us back to the opening scene at the beginning of the episode. So it kind of comes full circle. And we see what happens immediately after Ruby's mother drops her off in front of the church. The goblins proceed to kidnap Ruby and take her up to their ship. And the Doctor, using his anti-gravity gloves, pulls the ship down from the sky, impaling the ship and the Goblin King through the heart with the steeple of the church. And as the Goblin King dies, the flying ship and all the other goblins disappear into some sort of cosmic oblivion. Now, this is all a bit anticlimactic if you ask me, and the pacing, like the 60th anniversary specials, is a little off. I feel like things happen a little too fast, even in this episode. But apparently, goblin magic, which was unclear what exactly happened, is something that we don't understand thus far in Doctor Who. So, go figure. The Doctor finally returns baby Ruby in front of the church so that he can fix the timeline. And as he gets back in his TARDIS, he once again sees her mother walking away from the scene. And he's tempted to go and discover her identity, but he refrains, and time travels back to the present. Now, when the Doctor returns to the present, back to Ruby's flat, he is relieved to see that she has reappeared and everything is put back to normal, although the crack in the ceiling still remains. He then excuses himself quickly so that he can go time travel to where Davina was about to be impaled by the star at the top of the Christmas tree that's falling on her, and he catches it, saving her life. Which, honestly, no one really cared whether she lived or died in this episode, but I guess it was just something that Russell T Davies thought that we would be wondering about. So now we know that she's okay. She did not die when she was hit by the tree. The Doctor then returns just outside Ruby's house and has an exchange with Mrs. Frost, who now seems to be very impressed by the TARDIS and how it can appear and disappear in front of her house, whereas before she was arguing with the neighbor about its presence being a nuisance. And in a moment of regret during this conversation, the Doctor says that he thinks he might be the reason Ruby's been having all this bad luck. The same bad luck that attracted these time-traveling goblins to her. So he gets in his TARDIS, and we're led to believe that he is about to time travel away, leaving Ruby behind. Now the episode cuts to Ruby inside the flat with her mom, and she finally has a moment to think about all the strange things that have happened throughout the day. She remembers the doctor mentioning that he went back in time to save her as a baby, how he had spent a summer with Harry Houdini, and how when they were captured on the Goblin ship, he had mentioned that the goblins weren't exactly time travelers, even though that they apparently have the ability to time travel, which I don't really understand that. But he said that time travelers are better, cooler, and much different than these goblin creatures. Now, as Ruby remembers that conversation, she comes to the obvious conclusion that he himself is a time traveler. And now she runs down from her flat and asks Mrs. Frost where the doctor went. And Mrs. Frost, in a very strange manner, motions to the TARDIS. And Ruby proceeds to follow her directions, opening the TARDIS, looking inside and seeing that it is bigger on the inside. And this is where her journey with the doctor begins. Now, as the two time travel away together in the TARDIS, the other neighbor, a gay character if I might add, sticking with the trend, runs up to Mrs. Frost and asks her if she saw the blue box disappear in front of their very eyes. And Mrs. Frost, in a very surprising twist, says, "It's nothing to be worried about," and she looks directly at the camera and utters the words, "Haven't you ever seen a TARDIS before?" Now, this is an obvious Easter egg of some sort, hinting that Mrs. Frost is either a recurring character from Doctor Who, possibly Classic Who, or she may be an aged version of one of the current characters, possibly even Ruby Sunday. We have no idea who she is. She could even be a new character, but we will have to unravel that mystery as the next season of Doctor Who unfolds in the spring. So I'm excited for that. It definitely brings a little bit of intrigue to this episode and keeps us hooked as we proceed into the 15th Doctor's era of the show. Alright, so now that we got that summary out of the way, I have a lot of opinions about this episode. I thought initially the episode started out really strong. It had a very strong Christmas theme, especially with the snowy flashback to the church on Ruby Road. It seemed to have a very interesting vibe where we see the Doctor and all the characters being very empathetic towards one another. Whether it be the Doctor and the police officer having their exchange about his future engagement, or the exchange that Ruby and her mother have about her adoption and the prospects of fostering another young child. I really enjoyed all these heartfelt moments between the characters. And I also love the fact that it was kind of mixed in with these series of unfortunate events that the goblins were causing. And the sequence in which the Doctor gets crushed by the snowman, I thought was so cool. And I really looked forward to having that level of action throughout the episode. Unfortunately, I don't think we got it in the second half of the episode. Once the Doctor and Ruby entered the Goblin ship, I feel like the episode started to go downhill. Things weren't quite explained too much. We had another revisit to the joke from the 60th anniversary where they mispronounced gravity as mavity, which is a reference to David Tennant's 14th Doctor and his interaction with Isaac Newton. I also expected this so-called language of luck that the Doctor kept referring to be more of an integral part of how he was going to defeat the goblins. I did like to see how somewhat violently he did defeat them, because that's something we don't always get in Doctor Who, where the Doctor just blatantly kills someone. That was kind of unexpected. But I really thought he was going to use some sort of reversal of luck on these goblins in order to beat them at their own game, so to speak. That didn't quite happen. Now, not to repeat myself too much, but we did see a lot of woke agenda sprinkled throughout this episode, specifically gay and trans characters being introduced, including the Doctor being hinted at as being gay himself, which was not a complete surprise to me or probably most of the fans of the show that are returning with high hopes for this new Russell T Davies era. Something I hope really doesn't keep happening is these musical numbers that we see in the most recent two specials. I know that Doctor Who is being distributed by Disney, and they do have some influence in what goes on in the show, but to be honest with you, if every new episode has a musical number, the show as a whole is probably going to become a little too camp, and it's going to start feeling like a Disney Channel production instead of a sci-fi program made for adults. That's just my opinion, but let me know what you guys think in the comments. Something I also really wanted to see was a little bit more of the Doctor's new sonic screwdriver. Now, I personally hate the new look of the sonic screwdriver. I think it looks like a television remote, and I don't really think it's within keeping with the classic sonic screwdriver design. At the very least, it should be long and cylindrical, and this particular sonic screwdriver is flat and somewhat round and very large. They actually released a sort of spotlight YouTube video on the Sonic, and I want to play that for you right now just to get you a closer look at the device, because we didn't get to see a whole lot of it in this Christmas special.
What is that thing?
Sonic screwdriver. My name is Ncuti Gatwa. I'm going to be talking to you about my sonic screwdriver. We all know what the sonic screwdriver is. Magnificent piece of Gallifreyan technology that helps the Doctor through all his scrapes and has lots of useful nooks and crannies to it. My favorite thing about the Sonic is this message that is written in Gallifreyan symbols, and it is a Rwandan proverb. It translates to the sharpness of the tongue defeats the sharpness of the warrior. You hold it like this, it can light up. Powered by a crystal, a purple one. It has this little thing that can flip out that the Doctor uses when he wants to connect to another piece of technology. So like a USB port, if you will. Thank you so much for joining me. And remember that the sharpness of the tongue always defeats the sharpness of the warrior.
So there you guys have it. A little more detail about this sonic screwdriver. I think this Rwandan saying that's apparently written in Gallifreyan hieroglyphics is a little silly. I mean, when did the Doctor find his origins in Rwanda? And the sharpness of the tongue being greater than the sharpness of the warrior is just another way of saying the pen is sharper than the sword. I think that they're really trying to pander to the Doctor's race here, but whatever. I mean, it's really not bothering anyone. I just think there's a lot of unnecessary things going on in Doctor Who right now. A lot of identity politics, as I said before. All right, guys. So I know I've had a lot of kind of negative opinions so far about this episode, but in general, I did enjoy it. I thought it was very entertaining. It wasn't quite what we're used to in terms of Doctor Who, but if this is the new tone of the series, I can definitely deal with it. I'm trying my best to overlook all the downsides that I previously mentioned, but I think Ncuti Gatwa's Doctor has a very charismatic vibe. He meshes really well with Millie Gibson, who throughout the episode had a very bubbly and smiley personality, and she seemed to really roll with the punches when it came to all the crazy stuff that the Doctor was doing in front of her, which is definitely a refreshing take on a companion. The last time we saw something like that was probably when Clara was introduced to the series, which, if you guys didn't already know, Clara is my favorite companion in New Who. So I'm starting to like Millie Gibson as Ruby Sunday already. Now, as we begin to wrap up this episode of Eldest Born, I want to do one more thing, which is let's watch the trailer for the new season of Doctor Who that comes out in the spring, because I don't think I'm going to be doing any more reaction videos to any more new Doctor Who episodes. I think we're going to start moving on to other topics of discussion, but I do want to give us all a taste of what's in store for Doctor Who fans going into 2024. So let's take a look.
Into the vortex. I have the whole universe at my fingertips.
Oh, this is Pete.
You can't! Happy Road Studios!
Alright, let's take it from the top.
Ruby, there are powers beyond the universe.
Are you getting scared because you're just babbling now?
Ah! Smell faster! No job, no boss. Just fun. Classic. I'd love it if you came with me.
So it seems to be a very interesting season we have to look forward to. I noticed a few things. One was what seemed like a villain played by some sort of drag queen, and I can only guess that that's going to turn out to be the Master or something like that. Or some people online are talking about either Mrs. Frost being the Ronnie, but maybe that character is the Ronnie. I'm not familiar enough with the Ronnie to tell you how she would reappear in Doctor Who, but I know a lot of people online are eagerly awaiting the return of the Ronnie. Now, I I noticed that Rose Noble is going to make an appearance again as the Doctor and her reunite at unit headquarters in that trailer. And there seem to be a bunch of new creatures we haven't seen before. Also, apparently the Doctor is going to interact with the Beatles, so that is going to be exciting. I'd love to see what their take on that whole thing is. So yeah, there's a lot of interesting stuff to look forward to. I'm going to keep an open mind as we head into the new year and continue to watch Doctor Who in the spring. But let me know what you guys think the best Doctor Who Christmas special has been thus far. I personally love Last Christmas, which was the 2014 Christmas special where the 12th Doctor saves Christmas with the help of Santa Claus. Also, guys, let me know your theories about all these mysteries that Russell T Davies has set up for us throughout the 4 specials this year. Who exactly is Mrs. Frost and how does she know about the TARDIS? Who was the Meep referring to when he mentioned his boss? Who could possibly be the one that the toy maker referred to as he who waits? Whose hand was responsible for picking up the tooth in which the toy maker had said he trapped the master in? And finally, who do you guys think Ruby Sunday's parents are? A lot of people online seem to think it may be River Song or even some sort of weird coincidence where through time travel, she actually is her own mother, which is very bizarre, but it's been known to happen in other works of fiction. One specifically that comes to mind is the Netflix series Dark, but that's a bit of a spoiler if you haven't already seen it, so I won't say any more. Alright guys, so thank you again for watching. It's been an awesome year of podcasting. I just want to wish everyone happy holidays, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, Happy Hanukkah if you're Jewish. And once again, please like, share, follow, subscribe, comment. You could find us at 3brothers_podcast on Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and TikTok, as well as 3brothers_Eldest Born on Instagram. So I hope you've enjoyed this episode as we conclude our Doctor Who content for the year. Thanks for watching.